evening. Thank you for watching Up to Date. My name is Emma Faye Redcon. Did you know that there are more slaves today through forced labor and human trafficking than ever before in history? In our modern day and age, it is estimated that more than 40.3 million people are in slavery. It is believed that the lack of human rights and the presence of political corruption are keeping this epidemic in the dark. The levels of severity of human trafficking is broken up into tiers 1, 2, and 3. Tier 3 is the highest, and the US releases a report that determines which tier a country falls on. If you search countries with the highest number of human trafficking, China is now among the highest in the world, and this is recent international news. Tonight, I will discuss the US and global media coverage of China's record on human trafficking. More particularly, I will discuss the impact of a recent report of June 2017, which the US Department of Justice downgraded China to Tier 3 in human trafficking. This has brought up a series of consequences for China, including economic and cultural exchange. The news coverage in the Asian world surrounding this downgrade to Tier 3 believes it is an international disgrace. Some media has documented that China believes it is a political move rather than a social justice agenda. They are claiming the report seemed on the surface to involve human rights, but in reality it is a hidden political motive. The US released a 454-page trafficking of persons report that highly criticized China. It stated, quote, "The government of the People's Republic of China does not fully meet the minimum standards for the elimination of trafficking and is not making efforts to do so. Therefore, China was downgraded to Tier 3. Despite the lack of significant efforts, the government took some steps to address trafficking, including cooperation with other countries to investigate cases involving Chinese trafficking victims overseas, and by funding awareness campaigns and materials to increase general understanding of the issue." US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson explained that China was downgraded, quote, "in part because it has not taken serious steps to end its own complicity in trafficking, including forced laborers from North Korea who are located in China." In this segment, I will look at the coverage of the New York Times, Bloomberg, and the US News and World Report, and also BBC from the United Kingdom. I will look at Taiwan News and the Japanese Times. I want to analyze how they cover the news of an issue that has implications beyond human rights. In this analysis, I will use the perspectives of agenda setting and framing. In this show, I will answer 3 questions. First, how did the US, British, and Asian media cover the downgrading of China and human trafficking? Secondly, how did Asian media respond to the US report? Thirdly, what were the main angles? The Bloomberg is the only article that framed the demotion of China to Tier 3 as a social justice problem. The paper goes deep into details why and how the issue developed to Tier 3. The article is titled, "The Real Source of Human Trafficking in China." They give 2 main reasons to the downgrading of China. Firstly, they reference the cultural implications of the one-child policy and the preference for sons. The consequence has been bachelor villages and a higher ratio of boys to girls, which resulted in a higher demand on prostitution. Secondly, they said the gender imbalances in China have led to a higher bride price in rural areas, which consequently leads to women being trafficked in. The BBC covered that, quote, China has taken steps to raise awareness and work with international organizations, but drew attention to continuing cases of child and adult forced labor and sex trafficking of women and girls. It said trafficking was pronounced among China's internal migrant population and that the country's one-child policy had produced more boys than girls, fueling demand for prostitution and foreign brides. The BBC media coverage references the same implications as the Bloomberg article. BBC News held the perspective of a social justice issue for most of the paper. They referred to the report factually and focused overall on the issue of the human trafficking within China. Towards the end of the news coverage, they shift abruptly to political agenda. The article makes the point of the U.S. Department releasing the report and not the White House. But later, they connect that politically the report reflects on what is happening within the Trump administration on a global level with China and North Korea. Political Asian news coverage such as the Japan Times and Taiwan News cover the papers from a political standpoint and the effects the Tier 3 decision had on the context of the Asian world. These papers are closest to North Korea in comparison to the United States and the United Kingdom papers, and they frame their stories involving the political implications of the human trafficking report. Their agendas within the news stories are concerned with the overall political effects the report had, especially in regards to North Korea and the U.S. relations with China. The Japan Times claimed that the downgrading of China will upset the overall leadership. The newspaper points out that the Trump administration has been cautious to protect the relationship with China to ally against North Korea's nuclear-armed missile program. Taiwan News also framed their coverage of the recent demotion of China to Tier 3 by expressing their surprise of the U.S. criticizing China, while in the meanwhile trying to gain their support from them to pressure North Korea to abandon their nuclear weapon programs. The NPR references the growing tensions between the needed global partner of China and why the U.S. decision to downgrade them to Tier 3 was politically unwise. The National Public Radio's article wrote that, quote, the downgrading has the potential to increase tensions between the U.S. and China. China is North Korea's primary ally, and the U.S. has been trying to enlist them and their help in persuading North Korea to halt its nuclear program. The New York Times addresses two main angles of the political and economical agenda setting. The article addresses the same political fears of weakening ties with China and sets an agenda by pointing out Trump's contradictory stances on China's currency and trade. The New York Times points out that President Trump first criticized China's economic practices, and then he had a sudden shift to utilize China to rein in North Korea's nuclear programs. The article states, quote, the Commerce Department is expected this week to announce that for national security reasons, the domestic steel industry must be saved from imports, beginning a process that could lead to significant tariffs being placed on imported steel. That action would likely infuriate the Chinese, end quote. The New York Times framed the articles on the economic effects regarding steel and tariffs on the imported product. The Atlantic works to frame the article on the economic implications the downgrade had on China. The newspaper shares the designation means the U.S. can cancel military and non-humanitarian assistance in exchange of government officials and vote against IMF or World Bank loans. The Atlantic makes sure that their readers understand Tier 3 has serious consequences. They also highlight that the State Department adds forced labor of migrants and the harsh treatment and overall effects on the economy. National Public Radio indicates that Tier 3 designation can restrict foreign aid funding outside of humanitarian and trade issues. The article states that the President could withhold cultural, political, and economical exchange. In Asian news, they address what American news would not share. Every other article mentioned Ivanka Trump's presence with the Secretary of State Rex Tillerman's address, and some even mentioned her statement of human trafficking that had become a personal agenda because of being a mother. The Taiwan news writes, quote, "Ironically, Ivanka Trump's branded shoe factories in China are being investigated for human rights violations of their own, including the alleged use of coerced and forced labor." Through the coverage of US media and global media, we are seeing that they are putting a frame or an agenda-setting theory to make their readers think about either the political, economical, or cultural implications that the downgrade of China to Tier 3 has had overall. Thank you for watching. My name is MFA Redcon.